Mikayla Rose.
Yes. Director.
Welcome to the First Light podcast here at S Studios. Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for coming. So, Mikayla, you're the director of Hartley, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit about you first and then tell us about how Hartley came about.
Okay. So I'm a mum of 3 kids. Well, they're actually quite big now. But it just seems like yesterday that they were tiny. So, yeah, it's gone quickly over the past few years. I've got 2 who are almost adults and 1 who's still at school. And I guess that's been my, as a parent, it's your primary focus is your family. But then alongside that, I've established Hartley as a design studio, which is it's been up there in terms of like parallel almost with raising a family. And yeah, apart from that, I'm a runner, an avid traveller, and I love being at home and creating home.
So before Hartley, you weren't a designer or you weren't into design?
No. So I had a whole entire different career, which I also loved. Have a Masters of International Public Health and worked in developing countries in establishing health programs. So I spent 6 years with the Australian Red Cross working in the International Operations Department. And it was a completely different career, but it was something that I really, really loved and was very passionate about. And I did eventually, when I changed directions completely, there was a point in my life where I had to decide which way I was going to go. And I haven't looked back since, but, it was a difficult decision because I did love that work as well. It was very rewarding.
Yeah. And so not a lot of people would know that about you. It's not something that's really out there, is it?
No, I don't think so. No.
Yeah. So what was the moment that you said, I'm starting a design and interior design and Hartley's the name, and tell us a little bit about that.
It was, I love creating home, I think, and I had done a couple of renovations and, they turned out quite nicely, and I realised I had a bit of an intuitive process, I guess. And then friends were asking me for advice, and then it was friends of friends. And so I just started it very gradually as a thing on the side, really. And then, many years later, I got to a point where I was doing both almost full time, and I had to make a decision about, which direction I really wanted to focus on, and design won.
Yeah. And that moment, you still remember what happened? Like, was it a project, so this is going to be too big to take on, or what was the moment for, maybe some young designers listening who might be in the same position?
For me, it was actually, I did the Boston Marathon the year of the bombing. That was the first time I'd done an international marathon, and that day changed my life entirely. It was the most euphoric but also the most traumatic day of my life. And that it affected me really profoundly, and it was so emotional, just the whole entire experience of being involved in the marathon in that city where the whole entire city just is on board. There's a million spectators. It's quite extraordinary for someone, who had only ran a marathon previously in Australia. Back then, we really didn't have many spectators at our events. So, yeah, I really was very, very affected by that, and I went back and did it 4 more times over the years that followed. But it was a point in my life where I really thought, life is short and it's a gift, and, I don't want to take it for granted. And I didn't want to, at that stage I think I was 39. I had already established myself as a designer, but I was still working part-time in my other career. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, I don't want to wait another 10 years and be 50 and then wish that I had, or wondered what would have happened had I, followed that. So, yeah, I took the plunge.
Good stuff.
Quit my quit my other job and launched into it full time. I was already very busy, so it wasn't a difficult transition in terms of I was already had a big design workload. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Amazing. And so it was you for a little while, and you slowly grew the team. Is it, scary, but, growing that business, and then there's a moment where you become Hartley. How did the name come about?
It was actually my daughter, Hallie, she's a real free spirit. She's currently travelling around Australia as a 19-year-old, which is pretty cool. But I was talking to the kids about it, and I felt that my point of difference in the way that I approached my work was that it was, there's heart and soul in it, and I really take the responsibility of designing for someone very personally and want them to feel like it is a very personal engagement that I have with them. And therefore, my perspective, I think, is that, there's some heart in it, really. And so I was talking to the kids. They would have been little. We would have been driving to primary school. And Hallie, and I said that I wanted to use the word heart in the name of the business. And she said, we'll just call it Hartley, Mum. And so, I thought, well, actually, yeah, let's just create a new word, and that became who we are.
Fantastic. And do you think the girls might follow your footsteps somehow? Are they interested in design at all?
No. I think Hallie, she's very creative, and she's a natural artist, but not so much in terms of buildings. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So was there a defining moment where you realised design could really enhance everyday life? And is that part of the reason you started Hartley, and that's what still inspires you today?
Yeah, I've thought about that. And I think that for me, it really goes back a very, very long way to childhood, and being in the homes of friends where things felt ordered and calm and serene, and there was just a happiness about them. And, it was very much the buildings, so their homes, the buildings that I had a sense that created that sense of security and as a foundation. So I think for me that was, my earliest moment of thinking that, the way a building is shapes how you feel and how you live.
So Hartley describes this work as balancing beauty with practicality. Where do you define that balance in your work?
For us, there's no point in having a beautiful space if it also doesn't serve purpose. So, because then it's actually probably going to cause anxiety. If the space is not, cannot practically or functionally do what it needs to do, then it's not going to be a nice place to be. So we tend to address the practical and functional probably first, and then, the layering of the beauty happens with other elements as the design process continues, I think.
Yep. And you prioritise listening really deeply to clients and really getting a feel for what they want, of course. Tell us a little bit about that, because that can be quite a challenge as well, right?
Yes. Well, I think that for us, and this comes back to what I was saying before about, where the name for Hartley came from. For us, design is very, very personal, and we see our role almost as an interpreter. So, like it's a large and almost the foremost responsibility that we have is to understand what our clients want. Usually they're about to invest a huge amount of money, and in many cases it's the only time in their lives that they will make this huge financial investment. So we really see it as a big responsibility to understand exactly what it is they want to achieve, and we can only do that by asking the right questions and then actually listening to what they say.
So when you start a project, what are the first things that you have to think about as a designer with the client in mind?
Most people are very receptive to our perspective, and to be honest, most of the time people now say they do leave it in our hands to a large degree.
Sure.
Which is, a great honour and privilege. But there certainly are times when, people do have ideas that we really do disagree with. And to be honest, I'm actually pretty blunt. And sometimes I'll just say, no, we really can't do that. And there's always a reason. So I'll provide the reason. And yeah, usually it's actually, it comes across, I don't know, it's something that we usually laugh about, and no one takes offence. I'm pretty diplomatic, but I'm also straight to the point.
Sure. I mean, you have to, because, at the end of the project, they'll say, well, why wasn't this done? And that you've been through that process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think as well, and I say to them at the beginning, like, whilst we see it as our core responsibility to listen to you and to provide you with an outcome that you want and that you ultimately that you will love, you're engaging us as professionals, and we do have a responsibility to give you advice. Sometimes it will be in contradiction to what you think you might want or need, and everyone is happy with that explanation.
Yeah.
And I would say on most projects there is at least one time usually where we have to kind of put our foot down and say, well, no, we really don't think that's going to be the right solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever had like a big surprise where you're like, oh, we're taking a bit of a risk here, but we think it's going to be amazing, and sure enough it's amazing, but you're still a bit nervous about it?
Do you know, I think that almost there's an element of that with every single project that we design and deliver. And so then, even though, you go, the work everything that you put on paper, you feel strongly about it, and there's a process of thoroughness of analysing it and perfecting it and ensuring that, it feels right. And visualising it, I think that's, fundamental, like being able to actually visualise what it is that is on the piece of paper. But then when we go, like as we do site visits during the construction phase, we can, start to see the ideas that were just once in your head actually being constructed and the shapes emerging and so forth. And it's just always such a thrill. And then obviously at the very end, it's, it's still... I don't know, we still get a huge sense of excitement and thrill seeing a completed project. And there is also moments where you think, phew, that actually worked out. I'm not sure if it's a good idea to admit that, but certainly I think there's a little bit of that is reflective of the risk that's necessary to create something that is going to stand out as significant.
Yeah.
If you just play it safe all the time, then it's just going to be ordinary, and I don't see the point of that. People may as well not engage us if their expectations are at that level. So
I think it's great. Have a bit of nervous energy and use that to, in the design and come through, and absolutely. That's good. You guys have a real knack of making places warm and cozy. Are there some like little tricks that you can pass on and say, well, at least do this, this, and this, and that's sort of almost guarantees you some warmth in a project?
Yes, I think that it's about the layering of materials and textures. There's a couple of projects we've done where the brief was very strongly, the clients really wanted essentially the house to be white. And I think those projects are still successful because of the use of materials. So whilst there might be layering of white on white, no two textures are the same, and it's the textures and the layers and the variation in materiality that makes those places still work. And certainly it's, the materials that do still make a place feel like it's inviting and it makes sense. And then with the furnishings as well, that's really important, knowing that people are going to bring in colour and life and when they're actually living in the space.
Sure.
You need to have that. You need to be able to forecast that when you're thinking about the actual built form.
And you also do everything. So you go furniture shopping and you'll select almost everything in that home. That's a big task to take people out and do that.
Yes, it's quite new for us. But it's becoming more and more common. So, and I think that's reflective of the way the business has evolved and the nature of the clients that come to us. But it certainly is important, a really important part about it. So we do enjoy that. It's very time consuming. It's probably not the best, I guess, business model because at the moment we probably don't charge enough for it. But
right.
But it's really important at the end because it means, like, for example, on Friday we did a photo shoot and all the core pieces of furniture in the home we had selected with the client. So, it really worked really, really well within the space. And it means that, I guess capturing the project at the end is, the outcome is much better. And obviously, yes, the client's, enjoyment of the space is much more realised and resolved.
Mm-hmm. And at what point does lighting come into the thought process, making a place, you visible light, but you also then have some features and things like that. What time does that come into the conversation?
I think right at the very beginning, because we know that lighting is super important. So it's not that we go, okay, so now we're thinking about the bench top and the flooring and now we're thinking about lighting. It just kind of is all in together. Mm-hmm. So we know that there's going to be critical details that are created with lighting. And it might be that we just know that that's coming and then there's a point in time where we get to it, but it's like it's kind of never absent.
Sure.
If that makes sense. There's steps in the process, but certainly lighting is one of the most important details.
Looking at some of your recent work, like there's a Toorak penthouse with a real rich layer of materiality. How do you approach crafting that deeply in your personal story?
Well, for those particular clients, they're a gorgeous couple and they had travelled the world extensively over a long period of time. So they had done what I do instinctively. They had collected things from throughout their travels that reminded them of their experiences and their journey. And I love that. I think it's really important. So for me, it was a great little playground, really, knowing that they had already done that over their lifetime together. So I think the first meeting that we had with them, they were, they were talking us through a lot of those experiences that they'd had and showing us bits and pieces of art and objects that were important to them and where they'd collected them from. And not all of them are, going to actually aesthetically sit well in the finished space.
Sure.
But then there's a process that we go through at the very end where we're helping them edit and curate, the pieces that they have, and sometimes it involves setting some things to the side, but really highlighting the pieces that are going to complement the space and be a part of their story. Yes, and so in terms of, I guess we're thinking about those things during the design process because the materials and the layering of the elements of the actual structure are going to be the backdrop to these important personal pieces. So we've got to think about that right from the very beginning.
Good. You've done a bit of work with heritage type homes. How do you balance that fine line of keeping heritage and then making it quite contemporary at the same time?
Yeah, I think that we love working with older buildings. So, and again, it's like, we see it as an honour and a privilege to be working with old buildings. And I'm always imagining like the history of a place when I'm, visiting it for the first time in particular. Imagine like the people that built it and the tools that they had and the methods that they would have been, employed to actually build it, which always just blows my mind because I think, how do they actually do that? And then, of course, you're thinking about the people who would have lived there back in the day. And I think that's, it's like it's elemental. It's kind of fundamental to like how we approach what we're about to do. Yeah. So honouring that history is really important. And usually it's a case of there's a bit of preservation involved, maybe some restoring some details, but then as well, we want the newness of what we're creating to complement the old. So we don't want anything to work in competition with it. Yes, and I think it just, I don't know, the new part just happens quite easily. But
good. No, that's good. Do you have a project where you did a collab with a client and it just went on a bit of a surprise for you at the end? It was like you didn't expect the outcome and it was quite surprising.
There was a project in Canterbury, which is Peppercorn House. And our client there was, she wanted to create an open plan living space at the rear of the property, which is really deeply connected to the garden, which was really important to her. And we just were really inspired by that idea. But then as well, she didn't want there to be any TV in that space at all. So, and that was a first for us. Like most families want or need a TV in that primary living space. We created a separate TV room, which was quite a cozy space, but it certainly was tucked away. So it was fun to create this open plan primary living area, which didn't have a TV in it. So the focus was more on conversation in terms of the way the furniture was structured, and certainly bringing the garden into the home and always having an outlook to, the greenery. So that was really fun. We got fully on board with that and the outcome was really beautiful.
Good. Is that something then, after something like that, do you then think of that for future projects?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, because you can see the success and sometimes there's been a couple of projects where we've proposed bringing creating almost like an internal courtyard or light well and increasing like the external perspective from within the interior of the home. And each time we get that across the line, it really creates a really nice outcome within like when you're inside the home. You have
beautiful.
Sometimes it doesn't work because there's space is an issue. So
sure.
Yeah.
What's one of the biggest design challenges you face regularly, and how do you tackle that?
Unfortunately, it's budget.
Sure, huge.
Yeah, so everyone's got a budget, and it's probably the biggest hurdle that we face. Mm-hmm. We approach it, I guess, from the very beginning. Sometimes people come to us with a wish list of things that they want, and this tiny little budget. And this is an initial conversation before we're engaged. We have to say, no, it's not possible to do what you want with the budget that you've got, or that we're not going to be able to help you do that. So we don't engage if we know the budget's not realistic. But, after those conversations, often people go away and they do a bit more research, and then they might come back to us and say, okay, now we understand, what things actually cost, and we realise we need to invest more, or we're going to reduce the scope. So sometimes that happens. And then I guess there's a conversation at the beginning about management of the budget and expectations. It needs to be a shared responsibility. Like we'll be constantly, and I warn them about this, I'll say, look, we're going to have to be constantly checking in with the budget and where things are at, and having conversations about where we're going to invest and where we need to pare back. And sometimes we need to document those conversations just to make sure it has been understood. But it is always the hardest thing.
Yeah, and I guess with building costs and things like that, you guys are constantly having to update that conversation. And, the project this year versus last year is very different.
Yeah, of course. We tend to engage builders relatively early if budget is a real concern, just so that we can get another perspective about, where the project is heading, and just to be managing expectations along the way and trying to educate the client and helping them to make decisions about where they're going to invest and where they need to pare back.
Yeah. How do you measure success in a project? Is it by how it looks, or by the end result, the client's happy, you're happy, so everyone's, how do you sort of see that at the end?
I think the primary thing that for us is it's the joy of the client.
Yeah.
So if the client is just overjoyed, and that's usually their initial reaction before they've moved in, perhaps. But then in time, you're still in contact with them, and usually the feedback is that we really love living here, and we've had some extraordinary conversations with people when they've been living in the space for some time, it's why we love what we do so much. We've had people get very emotional about their experience of living there, and usually very grateful, and it changes people's lives.
Sure.
So it's very powerful, and it's a great honour to be asked to contribute to people's lives in that way.
Yeah. I guess I never thought of it. The initial handover is very exciting, and it's all new and polished and moving in, and it's more like 5 years later, right, when they've been there for that long and they've had Christmas and family events and things. That's pretty special.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Amazing. How have the client expectations around interiors evolved since you started in 2009?
I think that clients are more informed generally. Usually they bring to us Pinterest pages or Instagram inspiration. And so our clients these days tend to have had more time to refine what it is they want. And there's probably less divergence in what they're showing us. It used to be that people would come to us and say, I really like this, which I can see it's kind of a Hampton style, but I also really like this, which is really minimalistic. And I know that they don't work together, but I can't work out how I'm going to make these elements, like how they belong together. Whereas now, I think what people are showing us, it's more consistent. There's a stronger theme of perhaps it's like depth of colour and texture and materials that's consistent throughout the images that they're showing us or the references that they're pointing us towards.
What design trends are you excited about that's coming through now, and what ones should people start to avoid?
I love it that there's less white plasterboard. And we certainly try to avoid that. If we can create a space where there's, texture being used and different materials being used to layer on walls instead of just a white painted plasterboard. That I just love that. I think it really demonstrates like depth and consideration, and I think those projects are the ones that are really timeless. So I'm excited about that, and certainly seeing more of that in our own work that's emerging. What was the other part of the question? Just
before we go to the other part, is it easier to do now? Like, we've got Venetian finishes here, and it seems like it's a really the done thing, and it's going to last for a long time, and it just won't date. Is it?
Absolutely.
Is that the idea? Yeah.
I think so, yes. And I think it's about the use of quality materials as well. So, and pairing, whilst we talk about layering textures and materials, there's also needs to be like a consolidation and a paring back. You can't just have a little piece of everything. So I think refinement in your selection of materials and their application is super, super important. If you're going to create a sense of, I think, calmness and elegance in an interior, And certainly that will lend itself to be very, very timeless.
Yeah. And the second part was, what should people avoid? And what are red flags when you see a new trend coming and people jump on board? How do you mitigate that and just maybe give the listeners a little tip on don't do this?
One trend that I never have understood is the white boucle sofa. What family can possibly live with that? I mean, unless you have a room that is, designated solely for, I don't know, adults.
Sitting, only do not touch.
Yeah, do not touch. Yeah, I don't understand that. I don't know. I think I guess with trends, it's like, is it practically going to work? So if something's not practical, then it's not going to endure. Mm-hmm. So the white boucle is a classic example of that. I think as well, we do see sometimes people they think that paring back and I guess having a refined and restricted palette, sometimes there's an idea that, there's not enough in there and we need to add more. So having multiple materials that are competing against one another. We do sometimes have people trying to push us in that direction. But I think, as I said before, the refinement of the palette and being restrained in its application is where you get this really, a strong sense of elegance and timelessness that will emerge in the project.
Where do you see Hartley heading in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think we're getting more and more projects whereby the clients are they have a brief for us, of course, in terms of the practical requirements of the project and, the number of people that need to live in the house and that kind of thing. But we're getting more and more projects whereby we're receiving that fundamental brief, but then ultimately they're saying, we just want you to design it and we're engaging you as professionals and the experts, and we just trust you. So
it's amazing.
Yeah. I think for any design studio, that's where you want to be. Great to have huge budgets, but I think that is a more fundamental, I guess, indicator of success in the industry. So yes, we're getting more and more of that, and I hope that continues.
Good. What's your favourite type of project and what's your dream, but you haven't done it yet, you want to work on this and you can't wait?
Oh, well, I've just been to New Zealand and, the architecture over there is so inspiring. But, before I went there, I guess I've always had a love of the high country here in Victoria. And, I'd love to do a house in the high country.
Nice. Okay. Reflecting on your journey, what's one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self as you were starting the business?
I think if you are putting in the hard yards, if you're working hard, if your ethics are in the right place and your intention is to do a good job and to deliver a brilliant outcome for your client, and coupled with being aware that it's not possible for you to know absolutely everything, and to have a willingness to ask questions of people who are expert in their specific part of the process. So like you, for example, will come to you and ask you for advice still to this day about lighting. So if you are working hard, you intend to do a good job by your clients, you have a willingness to seek advice when you don't know the answer to a question or a problem. With that as your foundation, then I think I probably, in hindsight, needed to back myself a bit more, because I was doing the right thing and I needed to probably believe in myself more. And so I'd encourage young people who are starting out, making sure they've got all those foundational things right, to just go for it.
Good. And is it, especially because you didn't have the design, background, traditional, is that maybe a little bit of, is this right? How am I getting through this? Like, you're kicking goals very, very quickly.
Not really, because I have, I've employed, everyone who works at Hartley is a qualified interior designer.
Sure.
And I have to say, like, if the experience and the doing is where, and they all say it to me, like, we've learned so much more in this first year of working with Hartley than we have, over the life of the actual degree that they've done. So I think it's the doing and the experience and getting your hands dirty. And again, I think having a willingness to put your hand up and say, hey, I don't have the answer. I need to seek advice on this. I think if you've got that approach, then you'll be successful.
Very good. And so is that kind of the same advice you'd give to anyone listening that is, wants to take the plunge and either get into design or start their own design firm? I think that there's an element to this business that is, there's some things that you can't learn as well. Like, whilst there's 1,000 things that you can, and the actual delivery of projects is where you will, you'll gain that. But there's also an aspect of, like, an intuitive aspect to it. And so if you're finding that you're, constantly banging your head against the wall and feeling like you're not coming up with the outcomes that you're anticipating. I don't know. I think just for some people, it's not, like, not everyone is a designer. Sure.
Not sure if there's a nice way to say that, but there's, there has to be an intuitive and creative part to what we do. And some people, unfortunately, they might, they think that this is what they want to do, and they kind of get to the starting line and they realize that maybe they don't have we might need to edit this part.
That's okay.
I don't know. Yeah. Does that make, do you know what?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. So I couldn't do what you do. So, I'm not that way informed. I'd need an interior designer to come and tell me how to do certain things. I can help with the lighting, but everything else, it's not my thing. What was I going to say next? Actually, I was going to ask you about, so running the business and still designing. Do you find it hard to juggle both? And do you kind of miss, do you do both? Are you still hands-on in every single project, or are you just overseeing stuff?
Yes. No, I'm hands-on in every single project. And yeah, it's a huge struggle, to be honest, running, because it's just not enough time in the day to, I guess, feel like you're on top of everything all the time. Like, I kind of have certain levels that I need to meet each day, I guess, to feel like, yeah, okay, this is under control. Yeah. And that's organised, and that's going to be dealt with next. So I certainly find the time and the lack of time and where to invest my time one of the biggest challenges in running the business. And running the business, it does take a lot of time and a lot of mental energy. Yeah. And I think that that's the part that I'm better at, the design side and the creative side and the engaging with people side. There's certain things about the actual administration and management of the business that could be vastly improved if I had, I don't know, a HR department and a social media department and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you just do the best that you can with what you've got.
If you could design a space that creates one specific feeling every time somebody walked in, what would it be?
I think that calm is not the right word, not quite the right word, but a sense of like coming home and belonging and a sense of calm and peace is really important. because I think that joy comes from that. If you don't have, because joy, I think joy is probably the answer. But then if you don't have a sense of everything is okay here and I feel calm and connected and this is where I belong, then there can't be joy. So I think that for me is like the primary element that we're wanting to create. And then from that, you know, so much, everything else can emerge from that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Amazing. Mikayla, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Is this your first podcast?
Yes, it is.
This is your first podcast. Thanks for joining us. And we'll, if anyone wants to get in touch, we can find you on socials, of course.
Yeah, great.
But thanks again.
Thank you, James.
Pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.